It was once known as the Paris of the Arab world, but now, thanks to the Syrian conflict, Beirut is once again struggling to rebuild its tourism industry.
What happened in 2011 in Syria, they cut down all the effort we've done and all the investment we've done.
On this week's Fast Track, we're in the Middle East as the government offers incentives to tourists to come to Beirut. Plus, we head to Indonesia on the trail of undiscovered islands in the eastern part of the country.
And later on the Fast Track Travel Clinic, any recompense for airline passengers hit by the wintry weather in Europe.
Hello and welcome to Fast Track. I'm Fiona Foster. Now we start today's programme in a place which many people consider to be the most liberal and diverse in the Middle East. But for years, travellers have tended to give it a miss. That's partly because of decades of violence and unrest, but also more recently because of its close proximity to Syria in the north and east and Israel to the south. I'm talking, of course, about Beirut. But now the Lebanese government has launched a 50-50 campaign to try and entice visitors back. We sent Anna Holligan to find out what kind of impact the Syrian conflict is having on the Lebanese capital, once dubbed the Paris of the Middle East.
A kaleidoscope of cultures. Beirut is a playground. It's famous as the place you can ski in the morning and have a swim in the afternoon.
Beirut, the thriving, beautiful capital city of Lebanon.
In the 1960s and 70s, it was a party city, a Middle Eastern Las Vegas, where travellers could escape their strict home rules and come to liberal Lebanon to enjoy a more Western style of freedom.
In this small land bordered by Israel and Syria, the east and west fuse smoothly.
Beirut was just beginning to rebuild its reputation after a 15-year civil war. But then, the conflict exploded next door. Waves of tourists from east and west have abandoned these beaches.
Since 2010, the number of tourists visiting Lebanon has fallen by 37%. There's been a 70% drop in seasonal workers, and this in a country that relies on tourism for around a quarter of its GDP.
Airlines do still fly here, most via Dubai or Istanbul, where they place passengers on local flights into Beirut. Hotels, though, aren't getting the guests, at least not the profitable types. Many owners have been forced to drop prices to stimulate demand. You can find a decent 4-star hotel here for less than 75,000 Lebanese pounds or $50 a night. Even so, occupancy rates have plummeted to below 40%.
What happened in 2011 in Syria, they cut down all the effort we've done and all the investment we've done. The international media is only reporting what's happening in Lebanon. And because we have the Hezbollah in Lebanon, and it's a Lebanese party in Lebanon, the media are reporting that this is a terrorist party in Lebanon, and when you speak about terrorism and tourism, it doesn't fit together.
A determined skyline punctuated by steeples and minarets. Buildings bear the scars of a wounded city. A reminder, this country is still in recovery.
is beyond.
The old Holiday Inn. During the conflict, locals say rival militia would occupy different wings, destroying this and so much beyond. Though there is peace now, the tensions remain. This monument marks the place where former Prime Minister Rafik Hariri was assassinated in 2005. The car bomb blast was so strong it ripped through the St George's Hotel. The fear here now is that the violence in Syria is already spilling over into Lebanon.
On the other side of those mountains lies Syria. The border is just an hour's drive from here. And although that is not Lebanon's war, every day signs the conflict is coming closer. And from a distance, it can be hard to tell where the boundaries lie. This is Sabra. It's a Palestinian refugee camp, one of the busiest in Beirut. There are around 370 Syrian families who have fled across the border and are now living here in Sabra, putting huge pressure on the infrastructure in what is already a massively overcrowded area.
The conditions here are not good to live in. Those Palestinian camps in Syria involved into the circle of violence and was shelved many times by the regime. So the people started to go out of the camp and came here to Lebanon.
But geography alone doesn't explain why Beirut's tourism industry is suffering because of Syria. It's also about the current government. At the Lebanese parliament, they've adopted a public position of disassociation on Syria. But the three largest parties in the coalition are known to be sympathetic towards Bashar al-Assad's regime. Anti-Assad Gulf states, including the UAE and Qatar, have advised citizens not to travel to Beirut, warning of the potential threat posed by Hezbollah, a Lebanese group supportive of the Syrian government. While many continue to indulge in some of the pursuits that made Beirut such an attractive place to be, there is considerable concern about how this currently stable city and its once popular tourism industry may increasingly feel the blowback from Damascus.
The fact that Syria is so close to Lebanon, that there are constant fears of spillover that is more general and more widespread than the targeted assassinations or the sporadic clashes that take place in remote areas. This fear, this uncertainty, is the main obstacle for a revival of the tourist season in Lebanon.
There is a saying here, everything is okay until it's not. We look up at what the people here believe are Israeli jets patrolling the skies above our heads, though Israel will not confirm. Despite the tranquility, it's impossible to forget the agony being inflicted just across the border. Beirut's tourism experts are predicting more bleak figures for 2013. With no sign of a ceasefire in Syria, others in Lebanon may be forced to find alternative ways to go on.
Anna Holligan reporting. And do let us know your thoughts. Would you feel safe going on holiday to Beirut? And if you live in Beirut, we'd love to hear what effect, if any, the Syrian conflict is having on your daily life. Our email address, as ever, fasttrack@bbc.com, and don't forget to include the country that you're emailing from. That's the address many of you used following our recent programme on Jack Vroom, the world's most frequent flyer.
Well, I want my air pass back. I gave them, 20-something years ago, I gave them $500,000, and they agreed in writing to let me fly with a companion of my choice anytime I wanted to, any place they go, first class, till I die, and I'm not dead.
American Airlines confiscated his lifetime unlimited first-class air pass because they said he broke the programme's rules. Jack Vroom says they broke their contract with him. Well, many of you wrote in with your views, including Adam Bosilong from Botswana, who reckons Jack Vroom has a strong case for compensation.
I think American Airlines just grounded him due to their financial woes, and they're 100% wrong to confiscate his pass. It's a tarnish to American Airlines first-class travel.
But Carlos Gomez Villa from Colombia in South America reckons Jack Vroom was taking advantage of the deal.
In my opinion, Mr. Vroom has abused the terms of the air pass given to him by American Airlines. He made it a business since he was charging others to take them to other destinations and making money, thus taking unfair and wrongful advantage of the deal.
And Maurizio Totta from Sion in Switzerland reckons Jack had a great deal and should be grateful.
In my opinion, it's quite simple. During and after any possible bankruptcy hearing, the American Airlines pass holder should be treated like any other creditor. Anything else would be unfair towards all the other creditors of the airline, banks, shareholders, pension holders, etc. I would suggest Jack Vroom write it off as an extremely good deal, which was very advantageous to him as long as it lasted.
And thanks once again for all your emails. Now let's have a look at what else is making news in the travel world this week.
Ever wondered what it's like to be stranded at sea? Well, that's a nightmare come true for more than 4,000 passengers on board a cruise ship disabled after a fire in its engine room. The Carnival Triumph was left drifting for 5 days in the Gulf of Mexico. Passengers say the experience was marked by overflowing toilets, food shortages and foul odours.
It was disgusting. We tried not to eat.
It wasn't a vacation anymore. It was like survival mode.
Thankfully, the crippled ship did reach US shores early Friday morning. Planning a trip to Rome in the next 2 months? Well, expect it to be extremely busy. Pilgrims and tourists have been crowding into the Vatican after Pope Benedict's abdication announcement. A new pope is expected to be elected by the end of March. And finally, hundreds of thousands of tourists have travelled to Quebec in Canada for the city's annual winter carnival. Ice canoeing is the main attraction, where competitors race to push their boats across chunks of ice and freezing cold water. At night, the teams and spectators warm up in hot tubs. And if you're travelling there this weekend, make sure you watch your step.
Time for a short break now, but when we come back, Simon Calder's here with advice for travellers grounded by the recent wintry weather in Europe. And we're island hopping in Indonesia's East region on the trail of new destinations which are becoming more accessible by sea.
Hello and welcome to the Fast Track Travel Clinic with me, Simon Calder, and let's start with the bitter winter weather that disrupted flights to, from and within Europe in the second half of January. Heathrow Airport here in London was particularly hard hit. Amy Risham from Philadelphia was one of tens of thousands of passengers whose flight was cancelled at short notice, but she tells me all the resulting stress and expense could have been avoided.
The day before I was due to travel, the weather reports indicated a serious snowstorm. I phoned BA asking if I could travel a day earlier to avoid the weather problems the next day. I was told that I would have to pay several $100s to make the change, so I stayed with the original booking.
And to cut a very long story short, Amy finally arrived home over 24 hours late, having spent several $100s while waiting for a flight. I talked to British Airways on Amy's behalf, and it seems the airline wasn't giving any prizes for initiative. BA would allow free changes to people booked to travel on the day the storm hit, but only for later dates, not for earlier. The airline apologises for the problems you encountered, Amy, and will meet your out-of-pocket expenses. Gabby Riley had a less stressful experience. She was just leaving her home in London to go to Heathrow when she received an SMS message saying her flight to Geneva in Switzerland had been cancelled.
I had pre-booked car rental at Geneva and immediately called to cancel, but I was told the minimum charge was for 3 days rental. Since my booking was only for 48 hours, I lost all the money I'd paid, nearly $200. What are my options?
Gabby, had you booked the flight and car hire in a single transaction, then you get a refund in full. But the rental broker you used is taking the view that the vehicle was there and the fact that you weren't was unfortunate but not its responsibility. Check the small print of your travel insurance policy, which may possibly offer some compensation, and if that doesn't work, then talk to the airline. Although it has no legal obligation, you may be able to get something, even if it's only frequent flyer points. Susan Heffley from near Milan in Italy booked a series of flights from Stockholm out to Mumbai and back to her home city with Turkish Airlines. All the flights operated as normal, but she wasn't on board.
Because of a situation at home, I wasn't able to use them. I asked about getting a refund of the taxes, as that's something the company wouldn't have to pay. But I was told I would only get about $50 instead of the $300 I originally paid for taxes.
Susan, I'm afraid you've discovered one of the many hidden imbalances in air travel. In common with other carriers, Turkish Airlines adds a fuel surcharge, typically $240, as a carrier-imposed fee alongside genuine government taxes and airport charges. When you seek a refund, the airline keeps the fuel surcharge. Sometimes it's worth paying a higher fare that buys you the flexibility to postpone a trip rather than risk losing almost all the cash you've invested in the fare. For your itinerary, it would have cost an extra $700. Finally, Maria O'Brien is off to the USA.
We're flying to Boston for 3 days and then on to Atlanta. Do you have any ideas on what we should see and do?
Maria, you have two great and very different cities on your travel agenda. Boston makes a strong claim to be the birthplace of American independence, and the best way to learn the fascinating story of rebellion against the British is to walk the Freedom Trail, a red stripe on the sidewalk that takes you to the meeting halls and churches where a nation was born. Atlanta is a very different city. Dr. Martin Luther King's childhood home and the Ebenezer Baptist Church where he preached are now a National Historic Site and a shrine to the man who 50 years ago made the momentous "I Had a Dream" speech. Well, that's all we've got time for in this session of the Fast Track Travel Clinic. From me, Simon Calder, bye for now and see you next time.
Thanks, Simon. And having spent a couple of years in Atlanta myself, I would say go to a Braves game and do check out the old Fox Theatre, where the Gone with the Wind was premiered back in the 1930s. Oh, and do enjoy that southern hospitality while you're there. But let's end today's programme in Indonesia, the world's fourth most populous nation. It's a country separated by seas and clustered on islands, and Bali is perhaps the first place that springs to mind. But now a lesser-known part of the country is staking its claim on the tourist dollar. As Carmen Roberts reports, it's become more accessible to travellers seeking out new adventures.
The view from the plane window gave us an inkling of the journey ahead as we approached Labuan Bajo Airport in Flores, a 1 hour and 20-minute flight from Bali. This sleepy town is the main launching pad for trips to Komodo Island, home of the famous dragon of the same name. And to get there, we're on board the newest vessel on the market in these waters.
It's really no different to a static hotel, except it's moving. So the beauty about that is that you can engage in destinations that otherwise are very, very hard to get to.
It took 2 years to build, handcrafted in the style of a traditional Phoenici schooner, complete with 5 suites, including a master suite with a bathtub. We've already seen hotels launch liveaboard boats in destinations like the Maldives, but Alila is the first to do so in this part of Indonesia. And although a night on board doesn't come cheap, it is an option for holidaymakers who want 5-star luxury but can't afford to charter an entire boat. A journey on board will set you back $54,000 a week for the entire boat, or $10,500 a week for a regular suite.
Obviously, Komodo has been a national park for a while, and people have been going to see the Komodos for quite a while, and they do it on a lot of local boats operating out of here. It's only really more recently that the emergence of the luxury high-end sort of liveaboard experience has come about, and I think that going back 8 years, there may have been 2 players. Now you probably have 15. As the sun rises the next morning, it's plain to see why this is proving to be a hot destination for 2013, topping the list for many travel publications. But these isolated islands are surrounded by some of the most tempestuous waters in Indonesia, fraught with riptides and whirlpools, and the only way to get here is by some sort of charter.
And I don't think it's very well known that you can get here. I mean, we were unaware of it until recently, and we'd been to Bali 40-odd years ago, so it's not as if we're afraid of travel. So, but it's exciting to come, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them.
This is a nice journey. Yeah, we take a picture with dragon. This is because only from in the Komodo Island have dragon. Yeah.
We drop anchor, and it's a short speedboat ride to Komodo, a 400 square kilometre island that's part of Komodo National Park.
So, Komodo dragon laying down camouflage, waiting the prey come to breed.
Our guide shows us the walking route, but as we set off, rain begins to fall, and there's not a dragon in sight until we return to the ranger's station.
This noise of dragon.
And there we hear the hiss of the world's largest lizard. They can grow up to 3 meters in length and weigh a whopping 150 kilograms.
So there are 3 Komodo dragons behind me, 2 males and 1 female. They're very unpredictable creatures. They can snap at any minute. They might look lazy now, but I've heard they're quite fast. They've only eaten 9 people so far. Didn't quite anticipate getting this close.
Fortunately, these dragons can go up to 4 weeks between meals. While the dragons are the main attraction here, the area is also known for its rich marine life, including whale sharks. But on our dive, a clownfish and a partially hidden porcelain crab were the highlights. Underwater, we didn't encounter any other divers, and above, on land and on sea, the area was serene and seemingly untainted by mass tourism. But with the increased accessibility provided by trips like these, let's hope it stays that way.
Carmen Roberts and the Komodo Islands in the eastern part of Indonesia. And that's it for this week. Do join us again next week, though, when Simon Calder will be taking on the airlines, investigating one case where a family were charged more than $1,200 for a simple spelling mistake while booking a flight to Australia. And we'll also be in Argentina, exploring the discovery of mummified remains in the foothills of the Andes. But in the meantime, do stay in touch with us on Facebook, Twitter and Pinterest, and have a look at some of our trips and stories and features from around the world. Until next time though, from me, Fiona Foster, and the rest of the team here at the Hayward Gallery in London, thank you for watching and goodbye.